Hello everyone, my name is AlexVijaya and today I am going to give a lecture on the topic of Headstand Pose in primary sources. So, you may ask, what is so interesting in this topic, Headstand Pose in primary sources? The point is that there are certain poses in today's world. Every yogi, every yogini, every practitioner knows them. They became sort of the year mark of every practitioner. If you are a yogi, if you're a yogini, you should do these poses. For example, you should sit in Padmasana, in lotus pose. You should do headstand pose. You should stand on your head if you're a yogi. And there are also different poses that became sort of the year mark of today's yoga world. And everybody knows this pose, headstand pose, by the name Shirshasana, and this name sort of clung to this pose. So what is this pose if you stand on your head? Of course, it is Shirshasana, headstand pose. But what if I tell you that Shirshasana is just a recent name that was given to this pose maybe a few decades ago, maybe not so long ago, but hundreds of years ago, this pose went by completely different name, which we know today, but we call by this name some different poses. Also, this headstand pose had like very strange names that are not really so attractive, and they might put off some people. This pose had some strange names, and today we will discuss all those names and how this pose evolved, how it modified over the years, and in which primary source is the earliest reference to this pose, and how it evolved and how the name changed over the centuries. And I want to share my screen with you and show you the presentation that I made with my friend. Her name is Anna Gotra, and here what our presentation looks like. So, headstand pose, and here what the pose itself looks like. Your legs can be straight, your legs can be bent, your legs can be intertwined. You just stand on your forearms and you support your head with your hands. And it's important to notice that the weight of your body is on your forearms, on your arms, and not on the neck and on your head. It's very important. So that's what it looks like, and I have just shown you what I'm talking about, and here is the material that we have used for this presentation. First of all, this is the article from the Luminescent Journal. This article is called Headstand on the Fingers, Yogis and Their Heads in the Early Modern Period by Jason Birch. And the other material that we have used for this presentation is called the book Encyclopedia of Traditional Asanas. The editor-in-chief is Dr. Emil Karot. Also, there are some other additional material that we managed to come by during the making of this presentation, and I hope it will be interesting for you too. And here is the main material. On the left is Encyclopedia of Traditional Asanas, a very interesting book, and on the right is Headstand on the Fingers, the article by Jason Birch. So I would like to show you the book Encyclopedia of Traditional Asanas and tell you a little bit about it, because I have bought this book from the Lonavala Yoga Institute, so I want to extend my very heartfelt thank you for everything that they have done up until today, and I wish them everything everything possible in their research in yoga. I wish them just good luck in their research in yoga, because they do a lot of work for disseminating the knowledge of yoga as it is contained in ancient texts. It is basically what we do in International Open Yoga University. We just have a little bit different approach to how we see the question of imparting the yoga knowledge to other people. And so this is the book, Encyclopedia of Traditional Asanas, and I recommend to buy this book from the Lonavala Yoga Institute because it is worth it. It is nothing short of a literal masterpiece. And what does this book contain? This book contains very rare references to different poses in primary sources. It's like a catalog. First, you have a name of the pose, what it was called in an ancient text. Then you have a short description in English, and then you have all possible treatises that contain the description of this asana. And actually, what we have encountered during the reading of this book, what we have learned from this book, is that an asana can have one name, and it can be done in many different varieties. And even these varieties, sometimes they don't have anything to do with each other. They don't have anything in common. And this is the case with, for example, Dhanurasana. Everybody knows that Dhanurasana means that you should lie on your belly, you should grab your ankles and bend backward like a bow. But what if I tell you if it's a seated pose? When you sit with your legs in front of you, you grab one of your foot and you grab the other foot by the other hand, and you make a movement that resembles drawing a string of a bow. And these poses are performed completely differently, and this pose bears the same name. And so this is the case with a lot of modern poses that we know. Everybody knows them, and we have a certain image, a certain idea that this pose should be called exactly like that, and there is no option, there is no elbow room, there is nothing that can be changed. But ancient treatises say something different. And I invite you to dig deeper with us, and maybe even you can join our team at the International Open Yoga University, me and Anna Gotra and many other students and researchers. And let's talk a little bit about who wrote this book, Encyclopedia of Traditional Asanas. This book was actually a project that lasted for decades. So, as I said, this book was written in Kaivalya Dhamma, or more precisely, it is written by the Lonavala Yoga Institute. The editor-in-chief is Manmat Lakshman Kharot and his team. And so this Lonavala Yoga Institute was founded by the man named Kulyananda, and he lived in the beginning of the 20th century. So he lived in the 20th century, and he promoted the views that yoga and science should be connected, they should not be against each other. He did a lot of research on the connection between medicine and yoga. It was like laboratories in his institute. And so he has done a lot of wonderful job, and he is the founder of Kaivalya Dhamma, a very interesting enterprise, maybe very interesting project for a revival of the ancient knowledge of yoga. And And also I would like to talk about the other article. The article which we have used for this presentation, it's called the Headstand on the Fingers, Yogis on the Heads in the Early Modern Period by Jason Birch. So who is Jason Birch? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. He is working, or maybe he worked in SOAS, University of London. And this is the information about Jason Birch. After completing a first-class honors degree in Sanskrit and Hindi at the University of Sydney under Dr. Peter Oldmeadow, Jason was awarded a Clarendon scholarship to undertake the Doctor of Philosophy in Oriental Studies at Balliol College. And in 2014, Jason was a research fellow at the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies and a visiting associate professor at Loyola Marymount University, Los Angeles. In 2015, he was invited to research the histories of yoga, Ayurveda, and Rasa Shastra as a visiting postdoctoral fellow on a project called Ayur Yoga at the University of Vienna. He is currently a postdoctoral research fellow at SOAS University of London on the Hatha Yoga project, which has been funded for 5 years by the ERC. His area of research is the history of physical yoga on the eve of colonialism. He is editing and translating 6 texts on Hatha Yoga and Raja Yoga, which are outputs of the project, and supervising the work of 2 research assistants at the École Francesque d'Extrême Orient, Pondicherry. And here is his biography. And I think that it is very important when you refer to some paper, to some academic work, you should understand who this person is written by. This is even a saying from some Upanishad, that before you learn some knowledge, before you read some book, before you try to understand what somebody said, first you should understand who said it. In other words, before understanding the knowledge, before understanding some knowledge, you should understand who it originates from. So it is the prescription of ancient texts, by the way. So, and here is the names of different texts where different variations of the headstand are mentioned. For example, Hiranda Samhita, Sachitra Vyavaharika Yoga, Yoga Rahasya, Sachitra Chaurasin Asanya, Kirana Tika, Shri Yoga Kaustubha, Yogasanam Sachitra, Rudra Yamalam, Uttara Tantram, Shri Tatvanithi Kapala Kurantaga Hatha Besa Padhati, Yoga Siddhanta, Chandrika, Hatha Pradipika manuscript of 6 chapters, Yoga Chintamani by Godavari Mishra, now Nath. 84 Siddhas, Vachaspatyam, Volume 2, Yoga Pradipika, and Yoga Pradipika manuscript. Yogasana, Jain tradition, Yoga Asana Mala Sachitra, Yoga Marga Pradipa, Patanjali Yoga Pradipa. And you should understand that we did not find all the texts. We will take only what we could come by and what the authors of the book, Encyclopedia of Traditional Asanas, and the author of the article, Yogis on their fingers, Jason Birch, and there are a lot of other texts we were not able to come by, and this is why I am liable to say that everything that I am saying here is only in accordance with what I have at this moment. Maybe there is some other material. Maybe there are other treatises that I have not come across with. And also, you should understand that this knowledge is maybe a subject to change in the future, but as far as I know, I can tell you as much as I know. So, and here is the main points of this article. The main points, the thesis of this article. The Jain text called Yogasana is probably was made in the 19th century, is available in the Yoga Mimamsa journal. And according to this text, there are two variants of the headstand are described, and in both positions the top of the head rests on the fingers. Vrikshasana and Urdhva Samyukta Padasana. This is an ascetic variant. An earlier mention of the headstand is Narakasana, Yoga Chintamani, the 17th century. In this text, a headstand is described with the head and arms or elbows on the ground. This looks like the modern headstand. Also, we found the description of Narakasana in these texts, Shri Tattvanidhi, Kapala Kurantaka Hathabhyasa Padhati. Shri Tattvanidhi was made in the 19th century and Kapala Kurantaka Hathabhyasa Padhati in the 18th century. A distinctive feature of the majority of the pre-modern manuscript is a headstand with the palms placed close to the head. For example, an illustrated manuscript, Yoga Pradipika, 18th century, has this type of the headstand. It is called Kapali Asana in this text. The same pose in the Jain text, Yogasana, is called Pani Mukta Drumasana. So, this is the article from the Yoga Mimamsa journal, and here is the abstract of this article about Yogasana Jaina. And that's what it says. Considering the need to unearth the knowledge of yoga hidden in various handwritten manuscripts, the Philosophical Literary Research Department of Kavalet Lonavala has undertaken a long-term project on unpublished manuscripts. This is the background, and here are the aims. The current research work aims to study an unpublished yoga manuscript, Yogasana Jaina, by exploring the details in relation to the author as well as the content. Method. The method followed for the current study was descriptive. First, translation of the manuscript from Sanskrit to English, and then a critical analysis of the content were done. The whole manuscript, Yogasana Jaina, is devoted to the description of asana related with Jaina tradition and describes around 107 asanas with illustration of each asana. Out of 107 asanas, some asanas are variations of many popular yoga asanas. Some asanas are presented with right and left variations, whereas some asanas are presented in different variations as well as names. The current manuscript can serve to be of great interest to the yoga practitioners, scholars, researchers interested in the variations of asana according to tradition, religion, and of culture. Basically, the authors of the Encyclopedia for Traditional Asana, they only in passing mention this text, and here is the undertaking to bridge this gap that was made in the Encyclopedia of Traditional Asanas. And here, what the introduction says, I think it is worth taking notice of what is written here. Introduction: considering the need to unearth the knowledge of yoga hidden in various handwritten manuscripts, the Philosophical Literary Research Department of Kavalet Lonavala has undertaken a long-term project on unpublished manuscripts. The manuscript used for the current study is totally devoted to the description of asanas and describes around 108 asanas. The title of the manuscript is Yogasana Jaina. There are many manuscripts and published texts which describe the number of asanas as ranging from 84 to 100 and even more. One of the published books that describe more than 84 asanas is Yoga Pradipika. Some of the unpublished manuscripts are Yogasana Mala Sachitra, Jaitarama, Asana Yoga, Kapala and Siddha Muktavali. Out of the unpublished manuscripts named above, that is, Yogasana Mala Sachitra, is devoted to the description of asanas in a dialect of Hindi and provides illustrations of asanas. However, the manuscript used for the current study, Yogasana Jayana, seems to be different and interesting because it represents one special sect of religion, and the asanas described seem to be especially for the followers of that religion, and also provides the illustrations of each asana. This manuscript was procured from Rajasthan Prachividya Pratisthana, Bikaner, Rajasthan, a copy of which is available at Kaivalyadhama Library. We find this manuscript referred to in the Encyclopedia of Asanas. The compiler of the said encyclopedia has referred to all the asanas available in Yogasana Jayana, but has not provided composite and analytical information about this manuscript. The current study was undertaken in order to attract the asana practitioners as well as scholars toward this manuscript, so that they are benefited from the not so easily accessible information inside it. And so here it has different pictures of different asanas, and we are looking for Vrikshasana. We are looking for example, Urdhva Samyukta Padasana. And you will see just by yourself what is the description of these poses and what are the pictures of these poses. And you see how this manuscript looks like, but it is not complete, so you need to procure it from the Lonavala Yoga Institute if you want to know more. For example, here you can see Vrikshasana, which is, as you can see, is an inverted pose. We know this as Headstand Pose, but here it is Vrikshasana, tree pose. And another pose called Ardhankri Vrikshasana. So Ardhankri means half foot. Ardha means foot. Ardha means half, and Ankri means foot. Vriksha means the tree. Pani Mukta Drumasana. Druma means tree. Mukta means free. Pani means hand. So just Drumasana or Vrikshasana, tree pose with your hands free, as you can see here. And here is the Urdhva Samyukta Padasana. Urdhva means above, Samyukta means joint, Pada means foot. So it means the pose with your feet joined, probably above you, above yourself, above your body. And here is a very interesting manuscript. So also in the future we will take into consideration one of the texts called Himachandra Yogashastra, and there the pose Kayo Utsarga described, and here maybe it is described too. Kayotsargasana, standing straight on the ground with toes at a distance of 4 fingers from each other and heels at a distance of 2 fingers, gazing on the heart and reciting the name of Parameshwara, makes a practitioner claimant for the liberation. He also becomes detached from the world. This is not really headstand, but it will be connected to headstand in the future. I will tell you where. So let's dive right deep into the article by Jason Birch. Here you can see the pictures from Yogasana Jayana in a better quality. Here the picture of Vrikshasana. See, Vrikshasana. Here is Urdhva Samyukta Padasana, what I showed you already. And here you see also description of, or you see the picture of Kapali Asana from Yoga Pradipika, I guess. And we will see this in the presentation too. Here, what this article looks like. This picture was made about 100 years ago from a text called Yoga. It's called Purva Yoga Sopana Purva Chatushka of Khemanda Yogi. That's what it's called. Also, this is the illustration from the book in German. Here it shows you Vrikshasana. As you can see, the same way. Headstand called Vrikshasana. You see here Viparita Karani. So this is what Viparita Karani looked like maybe 100 years ago in the book from this period. But later it was kind of it evolved into a little bit different pose. If you practice Viparita Karani, if you are a yoga practitioner, probably you know what it looks like when you support your lower back with your hands and you press your elbows into the floor. And so here is the description. Vrikshasana on the left from Yogasana Jayana, and Urdhva Samyukta Padasana on the right from the same text, Yogasana, 19th century. It's very interesting to notice that Jason Birch gives a reference from Kapala Kurantaka Hathabhyasa Padhati from so-called Narakasana. Naraka is called hell. The word Naraka in Sanskrit means hell, so it's hard to translate exactly into English what was meant by this pose, by that name. Maybe the pose that delivers you from hell, maybe hellish pose, maybe hell pose, whatever. And so there is the description. Having planted firmly the nape of the neck on the ground, the yogis should raise up the toes of both feet. This is the pose from hell. Here is the description from Yoga Chintamani, maybe the 17th century text. Having put his hand and elbows of the arms on the ground, the yogin should lift the legs into the air like a stick. This is taught as Narakasana. And here is what it looks like in Sanskrit. That's what it is in this article. Bhumau swamastakam sthapya hastayoh kur paretatha padau kedandavat kuryan narakasanam iritam. From the Yoga Chintamani. So, and maybe this is one of the earliest references to this pose, to headstand pose. Actually, this might be a valid point, but let's take a look at what is called Narasana. Narasana in Rudrayamala. Rudrayamala is quite an ancient text. I don't know, 12th century, something like this maybe. And here it is. Here its description. Here is the description of Narasana. Atha Narasanam Vakshya. Now I will tell you about Narasanam. And it says here that it has 16 kinds. Shodasha means 16. And the interesting point about the description that it has a lot of kind of benefits from this pose. What will happen to you if you practice this pose like for 1 month, for 2 months, for 3 months? For example, Dvadashe means on the 12th month you will fly in the air, means Kecharobhavit. So it's too much promising. I think maybe it is written only for a greater engagement of a disciple. so that disciple might practice this pose with a bigger zeal. But the description of the pose itself is quite short. And here is the description: Adha Mukham. Adha Mukham means with your face downwards, with your head downwards. Adha Mukham Mahadevo Narasanasya Sadhanya. So probably this is the description to Shiva, to Mahadeva. So somebody, probably this is his wife, his consort, Narasana Sya Sadhanya, in the practice of Narasana. So you see the description of the pose itself, of how the sadhana, of how the practice of this pose should be done is very, very terse. Adha Mukham, face downward, that's it. What if it's not headstand at all? Well, it's open to discussion. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but it looks like it. At least it's what we find in the Encyclopedia of Traditional Asanas. Here is the Yoga Pradipika Book, 1737. It's called Kapali Asana. It looks like headstand, as you can see on the left. Illustration is made only in the year 1830. So Pani Muktadrumasana from Yogasana Jaina, 19th century. The picture of Pani Muktadrumasana, as I have earlier said, that Pani Mukta Druma means tree pose with your hands free. It's worth noting on the left that this picture is colored. So very interesting, I think. So here are another descriptions that Jason Birch analyzes. Jason Birch analyzes an unpopular variant of the headstand with the fingers or palms under the head. In the beginning, he doubted the reality of existence of this variant and its practice in the 18th, 19th centuries, but the confirmation of this was found in some texts. In the commentary of Sri Krishna Vallabhacharya on the Yoga Sutras, this commentary was written in 1920s, 1930s. There is a description of the headstand with the top of one's head and the fingers. And this commentary is similar to the Jain text Yogasana, 19th century manuscript, so probably this variation might have been present at that time. And so, probably there were two variants of this pose, with your fingers under your head and you stand on your fingers, and with your palms on the ground right beside your head, and there is a kind of tripod position. There are 3 points touching the ground. Here on the left, actually I found this book, Commentaries of Sri Krishna Vallabhacharya in the Yoga Sutras, that what this book looks like. And this is just a description. This is just what Jaina manuscript Yogasana looks like on the right. And here's the description from the commentary by Sri Krishna Vallabhacharya on Yoga Darshanam. Vrikshasanam Yatha. Here is the Sanskrit, and basically this is the main description. Urdhvapadam adhashira iti tat stambhavat. That your feet go upwards and your head goes downwards. Basically, this is the main description. Here's the description of Vrikshasana from the commentary by Sri Krishna Vallabhacharya. The tree pose Vrikshasana is as follows: having put the fingers of both hands on top of the head, then placing the 10 fingers on the ground, fixing the crown of the head on them and extending upwards the straight legs. This is the position of, as they say, the legs above and the head below, which is like a pillar. So, the other description of something that might resemble headstand from Sri Krishna Vallabhacharya's commentary. I remind you that it was written recently, quite recent commentary. It is described like here. The posture in which the feet are joined above the body, Urdhva Samyukta Padasana, is as follows. Having assumed tree pose, Vrikshasana, the yogin should join the soles of both feet together at the region above the buttocks. Thus, the position is accomplished. So you see, it is mentioned several times that Vrikshasana is headstand. Vrikshasana is the name of headstand. And only later the word Shirsha Asana was attached to the pose headstand, and it went along after that throughout many years. And we all know it as Shirshasana, but earlier it was known as Vrikshasana or tree pose. Probably the fingers resemble roots of the tree, and that is why it's called Vrikshasana. So, and here is the opinion that we have made popularizers or teachers of yoga of the 20th century did not emphasize the ascetic variant of the headstand in which the fingers were under one's head. The emphasis was more on the finger lock with the head embraced, or the arms that were by the sides of one's head and supported it. Birch found the following material of the 20th century. Charasi Asana by Brahmacharya Nrsimha Sharma, 1910, and Fakiri und Fakirtum im Alten und Modernen Indien book was written in 1908 with fragments of an unidentified treatise. In this text, the variant also can be found. The book on the right is the book in German, and here what it looks like. I have already found the description of these poses. For example, here you can see the description of Viparita Karani that looks like headstand, at least in the picture, and here is the description of Vriksha Asana. Let me find, here is the chapter on mudras, and earlier on you can find the description of Vrikshasana. Here are different poses that are described in this book, and here is the description of Vrikshasana. So, if you knew German, you would probably understand what it means. But the pictures in this book suffice, I think. At least for me. At least in these pictures I can see clearly that this is the pose called Vrikshasana, and it is headstand. Here from the article from Jason Birch we can see that here is the excerpt. Here is the picture from this German book, and here it is written Viparita Karani. You see what it looks like? It looks like headstand. And Vrikshasana, fingers under one's head. Again, the same thing. Although this book was written not so long ago, just 100 years ago, but all of them say that Vrikshasana is the name of headstand. So here are our conclusions. Jason Birch concludes that there were two basic variants of this pose, with one's head on the ground and on the fingers. When this pose is classified as an asana, it was called Vrikshasana. Supposedly, this variation has not survived in contemporary postural yoga. It's not clear what were the reasons for the fingers under one's head. Probably this variant comes down from an ascetic tradition, where it was a deliberate complication of the pose. It was done to make it a challenge. So probably the difficult pose was chosen to practice tapas or asceticism. And here is the rundown of what the authors of Encyclopedia of Traditional Asanas say. They use mainly the text, the Sashitra Vyavaharika Yoga. Probably it is written in the 20th century. We could not find this text. It's taken as a basis of Shurshasana description in the book, Encyclopedia of Traditional Asanas. In this text, 8 variations of Shurshasana are described, which are known by different names in other texts. Application of Shurshasana inversion in other asanas is described in other asanas. Resting of shoulders, hands supporting the head, head above the ground, without supporting of hands, legs folded, legs lowered forward, legs forward backward, assuming Padmasana, Padmasana lowered backward. So here what we can do in headstand. So Birch in the article Headstand and the Fingers supposes to the earliest mentioning and description of the headstand in the pose Narakasana of the headstand. The earliest description probably is Narakasana in Yoga Chintamani by Shivananda Saraswati, the 17th century text. However, the headstand has been known for a long time. According to the material by M. Karot, the earliest mention of the headstand probably can be found in the text Rudrayamalam Uttaratantram, probably the 20th, or probably the 12th, and to the 13th century. So we don't know clearly when this text was written. The poses are called Narasana and Adho Mundasana and are described as inverted postures. The descriptions are ambiguous. This text mentions 16 varieties of Narasana but does not describe them. And so I showed you already. This is the description of Narasana, and this description is very, very short in terms of what it is performed like. But the description of what it might give is really long. So here is the description of Adho Mundasana from Rudrayamala Uttaratantra, 12th or 13th century. When legs are taken up and head is down, it's called Adho Mundasana. One holds the breath in this position. So very laconic, very terse, not many words here. So another text that we managed to find is called Yoga Siddhanta Chandrika by Narayana Tirtha, circa the 14th century. Here's the description of Kapala Asana. So the name of the pose is Kapala Asana. Kapala means like skull, maybe. Maybe if you practice Kapalabhati, you know that the translation of this pranayama is called the shining of the skull. So Kapala means the skull. And here is the screenshot that we took from the book Yoga Siddhanta Chandrika. And here is how it is translated, this passage. Having placed one's head on the ground as well as the elbows of the arms, one should raise both feet into the sky as sticks. So we found mentioning of this pose called Shurshasana in the text Mala Purana. Shirasana, not Shurshasana, Shirasana. The word Shira and Shursha in Sanskrit are synonyms. The text is dedicated to the art of wrestling. It mentions a few poses but does not describe them. So only the name Shirasana. This is the only thing that we have. So here on the left is the front page of this book, Mala Purana. Probably it was written in the 13th century, and we in this text find only the reference to Shurasana, only the mention of the name, but we don't encounter any description there. So also it's a very interesting text that we have found during the work with the articles of Jason Birch, of his article, and when we worked with the book Encyclopedia of Traditional Asanas, we somehow stumbled upon the text called Bahir al-Hayat. Probably this is the first illustrated book on yoga. This is one of the opinions, so I cannot subscribe to this, but some scholars have this opinion. There is a description of the headstand in the illustrated book called the Bahir al-Hayat, or the Ocean of Life, by Muhammad Gauth, published circa 1602. This is a translation of the lost text Amrita Kunda, but the scholars have different opinions on the author and the time of translation. There are 22 asana pictures, and the headstand is called Akunchan, and this is not only asana performance but certain visualization practices. So if you want to know more, you can go to the description of this pose. You can find the translation of the 4th chapter of Bahir al-Hayat on this website, asia.si.edu. And so here is the pose on the right, here what it looks like, and here how it is described. The word of recollection of Akunchan. If the wayfarer wants to choose the Akunchan practice, Akunchan is the expression for pulling, that is, the seat goes up, i.e., one is upside down. In Sufi terminology, they call this the water lily, Nilufar. One sins in the manner of the Siddhasana, just as occurs in the practice of the Kechari recollection. The water lily is the house of fire and the place where the breath comes out. One holds the buttocks firmly together and pulls the water lily up by the feet. A kind of fire appears that burns up all impurities. All unaccustomed food will turn to ash. It makes known the usefulness of this witnessing. So, you see that the text is quite old, but the description is quite verbose. So it's very uncommon, as I think, for this kind of description. So what can we make out of this description? The water lily is the house of fire, the place where the breath comes out. One holds the buttocks firmly together and pulls the water lily up by the feet. So as I can think that probably the narration here is about the Kundalini Shakti, which goes downwards, kind of down by the feet, that is up because we stand on our head. So water lily comes up by the feet, and it is the place of fire, the house of fire. So it's a very interesting description. And this Persian yoga, this Persian translation is not really that known. It's not that popular. So maybe this will be of some interest to you. And so here is the picture of it. Also another text that we managed to find, it's called Himachandra Yogashastra, and here it is described as Duryodhasana. In the commentary to the 12th century text Himachandra Yogashastra, there is a pose called Duryodhasana, the head on the ground and the feet stretched up. It is described in the commentary to Kayotsarga pose. Duryodhasana pose is also called Kapali Asana. Kapali Asana is translated as the skull practice or the skull technique. As you probably remember, in the beginning of our lecture, I told you to take a closer look at what is called Kayotsarga pose. It's just the standing pose when a person stands. In the Jaina text, you see here Kayotsargasana, and so somehow it is described in the commentary to this pose, and the commentary to this pose wrote the author himself, that is Himachandra. Himachandra is the author of this text that Yogashastra means the title of the book which he wrote. And see Tatha Duryodhasanam Yad Bhumi Pratishtapya Shiras Utpadam Avasthanam Kapali Karanam Iti. So you see That's what it is described as. It is described as place your head on the ground and bring your feet up. That's basically the description. Very short, very terse, very concise. And so not that much words, unlike modern descriptions. And here is the Himachandra Yogashastra, the title. And as far as I know, this text is translated into English, but not the commentaries. Here, what the manuscript looks like. From the article by Jason Birch and material found by M. Karot, we can conclude that the variant in which the palms and fingers under one's head was one of many headstand variations. We can find its mention in modern textual material. This variant is among many others, can be found, for example, in Iyengar's work. That's when he lived, 1918 to 2014. In the 20th century, a distinct difference between Vrikshasana and Shavasana took place. Different poses were meant by these names. We cannot find the name Vrikshasana designating the headstand in the works by Sri Krishnamacharya, 1888, 1989, or by his disciples including B.K.S. Iyengar. It is interesting to note that Swami Shivananda, 1887, 1963, in Yoga Asanas, 1934, says that the headstand is Shavasana and adds that its synonym as a second name is Vrikshasana. So, it's very interesting that Shivananda mentions Vrikshasana as headstand pose, but he adds that it is also called Shavasana. So, our conclusion is that the earliest reference that we can find is in the text Rudra-yamala Uttaratantra, and probably in one of the commentaries on the text Himachandra Yogashastra, and probably Yoga Siddhanta Chandrika is also a very old text, and it is known by the name Kapalasana. The name Shavasana is quite recent, the 20th century. It's quite important to upkeep critical thinking and mind flexibility. It's important to remember about the centuries-old history of asanas in yoga and not to get attached to names which are required for conceptual clarity now. Asana descriptions differ from text to text. Descriptions themselves can be vague and ambiguous. For the purpose or for the practice of this pose, it's important to remember that it's difficult and it requires body training as well as anatomy and physiology knowledge. It's necessary to take care of the neck and to keep the body weight on the arms. So here are some basic descriptions, and here are additional pictures of this pose. So there is that's it with this pose. Actually, we did not mention that in Encyclopedia of Traditional Asanas, the authors used the book called Sachita Vyavaharika Yoga, as I think it was written in the 20th century. If you have some additional information, if you have found something not quite correct in this presentation, I advise you to write to me, AlexVijaya@gmail.com. You are more than welcome to write to me. That's what I wanted to say. And if you want to take part in this research, if you want to join our university, International Open Yoga University, you can go to our website, yogaopenyoga.com. There you will find free online yoga courses, and actually it will be very good if you could maybe take some interest in reviving the ancient yoga knowledge. And probably maybe you can join our team and become part of our team. We have lots of students, but we don't have that much English-speaking students, and probably you will be one of the first people who will be joining in this enterprise of revival of ancient yoga knowledge. And I hope I will hear from you. I will see you maybe one day, and you will be as interested in reviving the ancient yoga knowledge as I am. So thank you very much, and I hope to hear from you